In terms of my introduction, I've been everything from a producer to now an on-camera play-by-play announcer for ESPN, NBC, CBS, Fox, NFL, Pac-12, whoever will hire me, calling a variety of sports. I'd like to introduce the rest of our panel and have them just give a little bit about themselves before we talk about it. And we'll start with my friend, Violet Palmer. Violet, why don't you just kind of tell everybody a little bit about you, please?
Sure. Well, thank you, Anne Marie. And again, I am so happy to be here amongst these esteemed women on the panel. And thank to everyone else who are logged on and participating. I think for me, you know what? I'm a basketball junkie. I played since grade school. I was fortunate enough to get a basketball scholarship to Cal Poly Pomona. Uh, After graduating school, found had to get out into the real world, find a job, uh, and there was no WNBA at the time. I would have to go overseas and try to play basketball, which I really didn't want to do. So obviously, I was living out in the inland area. I moved back to LA. I joined my local high school association, and I put that striped shirt on, and everything changed for me. I loved this. I just loved it. I don't know why. It's a really tough business. You know, we're 50% right, 50% wrong, even when we're 100% right. But I was really, really fortunate, did really well, became one of the top NCAA referees for about 9 years. Received a phone call from the NBA, and I was placed in their training program. I did that for 3 years, and you know what? Very, very blessed. 97, I received that phone call from Rod Thorne, and I was offered a position with the National Basketball Association and had a magnificent career, 20 years, you know, really, really hard, tough, but I loved it. And I'm sure throughout this panel and this discussion, I'll get into it more, but that's pretty much in a quick synopsis, a little bit about me.
I love it. And of course, those of us watching The Last Dance at the beginning of the pandemic, uh, we're texting Violet. As soon as you see her there with Kobe, I was like, is that you? Look how young you were. How fun.
I know that was pretty cool. It was really nice. I got received so many texts on that, Anne Marie. Thank you.
It
Thank
was so fun. Let's talk to another boss on our panel, Blake Bolden. Tell everybody about you, please.
Hi, everyone. Oh, Violet, your story is awesome. Being a ref probably is really hard. I know from being an ice hockey player, refs get the worst, right? Like,
you.
that's so kudos to you for being so strong in that sport. I'm Blake Bolden. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and I know a lot of you guys are probably basketball fans, but I play ice hockey. I started at a young age, at 6 years old. I was introduced and I fell in love. I went to Boston College to play collegiately. I was an All-American, a captain. I played with the national team for Team USA. I played professionally for the last 7 years, and I've landed a job with the Los Angeles Kings as a professional scout, second woman to do that, and first Black female to do that. And right now, my passions, thank you, ladies, are to diversify the sport of hockey. I'm the first Black professional ice hockey player as a female as well. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I love the game. I love interacting with strong, powerful, beautiful women. And I met Miss Brown here with us, who has coordinated all of this through the Alliance LA. So thank you guys for having me, and I can't wait to talk to you.
It'll be really interesting to hear about your career. And then again, is your career as a woman of color in a sport that does not have as much diversity. Karen Daniel.
Thanks, Anne Marie. My name is Karen Daniel, and I hail from Kansas City, Missouri, if you can't tell by the logo in the background. I was born and raised there and spent a good bit of my life on the educational path in terms of our grandmother was a school teacher, and I thought that would be my path. I was moving through high school and so forth, and ultimately based on the advice and mentoring of my high school advisor, I was advised that I should, rather than teach school, think about a business career because of my interest in numbers and so forth. And I went to college at a small university in Missouri and then went to graduate school. But ultimately, I went to work for KPMG, which is the public accounting firm, and I stayed there for 11 years. I was part of a focus group on the weekends around how to break the glass ceiling at that time. And keeping in mind that was in the early 90s. And I decided that I wanted to broaden my career from auditing and be a business person. So I took an opportunity with Black & Veatch, which Black & Veatch is a global engineering and construction company, and certainly very male dominated at that time. But I went to work for them because they had a great reputation with clients, integrity, and they wanted to grow. I went to work at Black & Veatch, and ultimately I was able to be admitted to the partnership. I became the chief financial officer. I worked there for 26 years, 18 of which I was the chief financial officer, and eventually became a member of the board and division president. Along the way, I've always been committed to the community, and I decided to retire 3 years ago to spend more time with family, but also really increase my opportunity to impact the community, and my focus being on underrepresented, underserved communities. And in the background there, that's the Kansas City Royal Stadium. That was in 2012 when we had the All-Star game in Kansas City. It was also Kansas City's effort to celebrate the Negro Leagues Museum, which, by the way, has 3 women in the museum who actually played in the Negro Leagues. So I've spent a lot of time working on the community, and I decided with the opportunity to become one of the owners of the Kansas City Royals, I would do that, both because of my love for baseball. My grandpa taught me all about baseball since I was 6 years old. I thought it was a great way to honor him, but also the ownership group is very interested in transforming our community to help the underserved and underrepresented. So that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years.
Fascinating. And we have one more member of our panel, Shauna Griffiths. Shauna, tell us about you.
Yeah, hi. Thank you all so much for having me here today. I saw the lineup and thought, oh goodness, what a panel. So again, thank you so much for having me. And so I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, was quite a hoop head. I spent my early days in the inner city of Detroit, playing in every league I possibly could. It's funny, the whole thing about, being a female coming up. I was always in the gym I was like one of a few girls at the time. And so I kind of didn't really think too much about it. I was just, you going in and fighting your way every day. And, so I was very fortunate enough to play basketball for the University of Michigan. And again, I was so obsessed with wanting to continue my basketball devotion, and was able to make my way through Nike for 2 different WNBA seasons. And that's actually where I was able to meet the amazing Natalie White. And I was with the Seattle Storm during their inaugural season, and the Detroit Shock, which no longer exists, during the Detroit version. So I was there for their second year. And then I just got so obsessed again. I was like, I got to stay in the basketball lane. So I took my love for the game onward, and I was part of the start of what was then that NBDL, the NBA's development league. And at that time, it was so much about not only the development for the players, for the refs, but also for the front office. So I spent about two and a half seasons there. Then I got my own call up. I went to the then New Jersey Nets. I'm kind of dating myself with all these teams that are no longer available, but and actually, Violet, when you mentioned Rod Thorne, what an amazing, amazing man. And so I had the absolute pleasure of working with him for quite a while when I was at the Nets. And then I had spent 13 years in the NBA family in the seat of marketing, and really decided that the next thing for me was to go to the agency side in sport and entertainment. So spent 9.5 years at an agency there that was highly sport and entertainment focused. And I developed their marketing and brand partnerships divisions. And then COVID kind of hit, and that brought a whole new reality to the sport and entertainment and experiential world. And so I'm actually now, I'm right at about the 1-year mark of what I'm calling the new lease on my professional life. And so I have SLG Impact as a business that I started, really focusing on making a positive impact, evolving brands and people. So we focus on marketing, brand partnerships, and we also have executive and leadership coaches, because I think it's so key to really helping to evolve people and have leaders of tomorrow and today be much more effective and inclusive.
So how do you decide? I'll start with you then. How do you decide kind of which brands you want to take on, which people you want to invest in with your group?
Yeah, I think it is actually an interesting thing that you asked me that, because I had someone who had first approached me when I started, who represented a brand that does not match my values. And so I just had to make the decision that I didn't want to participate, and I had to just make, again, I just made that call in a really honest way. I said, it doesn't match up with my values and where I want to take the business. And again, it's pretty clear in the name and in our tagline, Evolving Brands and People, what we're all about. So, I really try to find the people that they're ready for the kind of impact we bring. And so I've had people recently where we gave them a proposal and they just said, well, it's not exact, it's a little bit, it's actually too much that, and I just said, if you're not ready for this level of impact for your brand, then we can scale it back for you. But, I'm really, really looking for the people that either from a personal standpoint, they're ready for that coaching, that leadership direction, and they want to advance themselves, or the brands who are. And it's interesting because I think some people and brands say they want to be at that next level, say they want to do those things, but then when their people's feet are really held to the fire, it can feel a bit too much at first.
Well, and in terms of what you're asking of them, and let's talk about women specifically.
Yeah.
What is it that you want to elevate? What principles do you want to elevate specific to women and women in sports, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it really is helping people harness their voice, their values. I think that especially like on the coaching and the leadership side, I think it's helping people to stand in their strength and to, really just own that. And I think that helps to propel the path forward. And I think, on the brand side, if you're talking about women in sports, I think again, it's how are you making sure that we can be at the next level, we can get there, what are the obstacles that are in our way, and then working through those solutions. So again, I think it's sometimes we have been in a position for a long time where we haven't had the resources. We haven't had, whether it's financial or the brand partners that were ready to come on board at that time. So, a lot of times we need to be able to bring forth those new ideas, new concepts, and even like new structures of how to work and how to structure deals, in order to help women, especially women in sport, really be seen and be on that platform.
In this group, you mentioned the word obstacles, and certainly all of us, everybody watching as well, we've had obstacles. The group, certainly from the panel, there's plenty of obstacles that have been put up for us. I would doubt, kind of like you said, that you didn't really notice that you were one of the few women. I didn't at ESPN when I was 21. I didn't pay much attention to that. Karen, I'm really interested, when you were at KPMG and such, I mean, as you said, very male dominated there. I mean, you picked two of the really hardest fields in terms of men. What were you feeling at that time in terms of gender and race, in terms of being the only one? Because I imagine you had kind of a double whammy there, Karen.
Well, at KPMG, it was really a function of I wanted to be in the business and, as it turned out, auditing. So KPMG was just one of the, at the time, big 8 firms, and I was lucky enough to be selected by them. I was, though, for many years, the only Black auditor on staff. And at the time, we did not have any women partners at KPMG. But as time progressed, with mentoring, which is really important for people around you to mentor. And I had a great mentor, a partner that I worked for probably half of my time there. He was a great mentor, and he was great because he gave me critical advice. Some of it was positive, some of it was not so positive, but because of the relationship, he helped prepare me eventually to leave KPMG and go to work at Black & Veatch. And I mentioned the fact that I was in a focus group around the glass ceiling, and the team said, well, why would you go from auditing, which was pretty conservative in terms of gender and race, to engineering and construction, which was very heavily dominated by men, white men. But the company had, as I said earlier, had a great reputation. And I went there with the idea that I could, gather skills, competence, and then move into some other, not company necessarily, but way forward. And once again, even though it was a very difficult environment with mentoring and other things, I was able to put myself next to people who were very intentional about inclusiveness. And my first boss at Black & Veatch, he was very much that. And he was determined, I think, to bring to bear diversity. And he had only been there a year before me. And moving forward, I met my next mentor, and he and I became mentor and mentee because he wanted to increase his financial acumen, and he was committing to teach me the business side of it, the engineering and construction side. So it made for a really good partnership. And he eventually became CEO of the company. And he was about diversity as well. And without much hesitation at all, he said, I'd like for you to be our CFO. And I'd spent probably 3 or 4 years with him in this relationship, mentor mentee. So it was challenging because as I went out around the world representing the company, not everybody had that same spirit. But whenever I came back and I shared my experiences, I used those as learning tools on how to impact the people that I worked with every day. And just really being intentional about this is how we're going to create an environment and a culture that allows people to excel and progress through their careers. And it didn't work out such that every single person who wanted to have the kind of responsibility leaders of the company had, but still I became, I think, part of the culture in terms of how we can raise people up, give them opportunities, support them in a difficult journey. And then you have more people within the company who are doing the same thing, but being very intentional about how we want to help people through their careers and journeys is really, I think, what made the difference for me. And of course, I had to work sometimes twice as hard as some others just because you have to overcome some of that skepticism, but it wasn't widespread as much as in that leadership group. Our CEO was really committed to it.
I love how you saw the people who maybe didn't share the values and very quickly, it sounds like, just moved on. Sometimes we just don't have time for the people that are trying to wrap their head around why we are where we are. That was always kind of my thing with ESPN is I've got time to tell you why I'm qualified. I know that I am.
And not allowing that behavior, as a leader in your immediate environment, I think is also important, difficult, but important.
Violet, I can only imagine some of the skeptics, perhaps in the NBA when you were reffing there, but tell me first, because I find the mentorship piece really important. And as the first female in that position, did you have a mentor there that kind of helped guide you at all? Or what was your kind of path in terms of handling the blowback, if you will, from some players who maybe thought you didn't belong there?
Well, you know what, Anne Marie, I was really kind of fortunate because, I was kind of thrown into the fire. I had no idea what I was getting into. All
Mhm.
I knew was that I love refereeing. I had the passion for it. I love basketball. And I just, I looked at the opportunity. It was just an opportunity for me. I had no idea. I didn't know if the NBA was going to hire me or not. I
Mhm.
was perfectly happy being an NCAA referee, working the Final Fours and getting all the accolades and just having a good time. But I knew that giving this opportunity that was presented to me, I was not going to let it just kind of slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
So going into initially getting into that training program, I had no idea what I was in for. I was clueless. But I knew that I had the work ethic. I knew that I was an athlete. I knew that I caught on really, really quick as far as learning the difference between the pro game and the collegiate game. Um, and so I just felt like, you know what? I know that they don't want me. They wasn't sure. I knew that the guys in which I was in this training program with, they just were like, "Why are you here? Why don't
Yeah.
you
Were there
work
any other
more?"
women there, Violet, or was it just you?
It was actually D and I. We
Oh,
were
okay.
in the training program at the same time,
Okay.
and obviously the guys, I was really fortunate because there was a group of guys that I can honestly say, five of them to be exact, to this day are five of my best friends.
That's right.
And they kind of took me under their wing and they said, you know what? We're going to teach you, we're going to help you. Um, and they did that. I can honestly say I've been very, very blessed my entire career.
Mhm.
But I was a sponge. You know how you just have to go into a room when you're the only woman in the room, and it's one of those when you walk in and it's almost like the door closes and everybody turns their head and looks like, what are you doing here? You
Mhm.
know? And I'm sure Blake, I know you felt that before. I know Karen has felt it, and it's a really tough feeling. And I want to say to the women that are listening that you just have to have your own intestinal fortitude, and you know that you're qualified, you know that you've worked hard, you know that you deserve to be there. And that was just kind of my mental attitude. I can honestly say that I was raised by two very, very strong parents. I grew up in Compton in the inner city, but I was fortunate because, of course, for me, having both my parents, all my friends used to tease me and they said, you lived with the white picket fence. You lived in the inner city, but you really didn't. But
Mm.
I did because I was very familiar with everything as far as what my surroundings were. But my parents did a good job of allowing my brother and my sisters and myself to be able to pursue whatever we wanted. So I really had no fear,
Right.
in taking that challenge. I knew it would be difficult. I knew that I had to earn the respect of my colleagues, the 60 guys that I had to work with. I knew that the coaches and the players did not want a women in a good old boys club,
Mm-mm.
but none of those things really were in the forefront in front of me. They were kind of, that chatter in the back, that want, that Charlie Brown want. That was really what it was for me.
Yeah.
So looking at all of that, I think I can honestly say that, had those mentors that I kind of trained with. Those five guys took me under their wing and really kind of showed me the ropes. I can honestly contribute a lot of this to my parents for just the upbringing and the confidence and saying, you know what, how about you can be whoever you want to be? It's up to you. And I think for me, with preparing myself for the opportunity, I think a lot of times we sit back and we go, woe is me. I'm not getting this. I'm not getting that. But in all of that, you still have to prepare yourself because you really don't know what's really out there. And I think I did that. And I think that was one of the contributing factors um, with my success. And not only a success as a referee, I'm now a teacher, a supervisor, a mentor. And I think for me, I've done pretty much everything you can imagine in officiating. It's kind of taken over my life, and I fell right in it, and I love it. And I will continue to train and teach until I guess it kind of goes on deaf ears for me. But really, really had a magnificent career. And I mean, there's nothing bad that I can say as far as what I've done. Yes, it was difficult. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I've had all the bumps and the bruises, and I've had all the media saying, you know, why are you doing this? And I go, I will prove you wrong. Just wait and see, which I continue to do. So just happy just to be given an opportunity, and happy not knowing that I would have been the first or the pioneer or the you know, the barrier breaker. None of those things were in the forefront, you know, because again, when you're in it, and I know Blake can attest to this, when you're just trying to work, that's really what you do. It's all about the work. It's all about your training. It's all about your development. It's all about studying. It's all about staying in shape. And you do all those things to prepare you for the opportunity that's in hand. And I was given that, and it's been a wonderful ride, I can honestly say. It's still going.
I know, I've got you on speed dial when I have questions during games.
You do.
When I'm calling games, that's true. So Blake, you're in a really interesting position because you're a little younger than most of the rest of us. And so you're going to be that mentor for so many people, and I'm sure you already are. And I feel like you're straight in the middle. So I'm curious to know kind of who helped you.
Yeah.
How are you helping the younger women who are looking to be in that sport as well? You're in a sandwich.
I am in the sandwich, and it's really fun because I feel like there's so much for me to learn and to still be a sponge. I just turned 30 last week. So I feel like I'm also entering a time where I feel like I don't really care about anything or what anybody's thinking about me. When I was younger and I was, speaking and doing this, that, and the third, I was like, am I talking right? Am I acting right? I'm in this community of ice hockey players and fans, and I'm this only Black person in this space, and I have to carry myself with such poise and confidence and try not to stumble. But I feel, as Violet said before, I've prepared myself to be in this position now to where I can speak eloquently and I can help the younger generations behind me, and also just keep learning and picking up pieces as I go. I remember, emailing Russia when I was going on TV national for NHL Network, and I was like, Rusha, please help me. I don't know what I'm doing. She gave me all the tips. Right? This is just such an amazing position for me to be in, and I'm just really excited to be here. I just want to tell you guys about how I became a scout in the first place, because it was just preparation met opportunity. I was outside of Staples Center with Black Girl Hockey Club. I ran into Luke Robitaille, the president of the Los Angeles Kings, and he is all about growth and development and inclusion in the space of ice hockey. He turned to me, he said, Blake, what do you think about being a professional scout? And at this moment in my career, I'm just playing hockey. I'm just trying to be a pillar for young Black girls in the sport. I had no idea that I was going to become a scout. And having done so, I've had so many leaders in our organization with the LA Kings, our player personnel, Nelson Emerson, the other scouts. Some of them, it took them a little bit, right? It took them a little bit of time to see me walk into those rooms with a business coat on and being a woman, and them talking their good old boys club, talking about golf that they had the day before. But I came and I was ready, and I was excited to give my insight, to give my thoughts on the game, just as a different perspective, as a woman, as a female player, and as someone who's younger and hasn't been doing it for 20 years as a older Caucasian male. So I've had so many people now working with the Los Angeles Kings for about 2 years now
Mhm.
that have given me the confidence. They've worn my last name on their jerseys for Black History Month. And that was the biggest hug of gratitude that I could have ever gotten from an NHL club, right? The best and greatest players in the world are wearing my last name just to say, hey, you're doing a great job. We respect you, we honor you, and we want to carry your legacy on. And that means a heck of a lot to me and for all the people that watch our sport. That culture and the game that we love is changing, right? So
Yeah. So as a scout, exactly what are you doing? Like, how much are you traveling? How are you interacting? Because it's one thing to be received by the Kings.
yeah.
It's another thing to be received by people outside,
Yeah.
the Kings, right? Who don't know you and then are figuring it out. What's that like?
At first, it was hard. I would walk into an arena and they wouldn't think I was a scout. They would just think I was a fan. And I would ask questions, where am I supposed to sit? I'm sitting in this nice area so I can view the game. I've got my notes, I got my monitor. And I would get the looks, I would get the questions, I would get the frowns, and I'm also getting a lot of attention around this position that isn't normally glorified. Being a scout isn't something that everyone is like, ooh, scouting this, scouting that. But now, as a second woman to ever do it, yeah, people are talking about it. For Black History Month, as the first Black woman to ever do it, people are talking about it. So I've got a few people that are uncomfortable with me walking into the rink. Right now, it's staring at computer screens and watching players on TV because of what's going on right now. But it's been fun. I've embraced it. I've been playing hockey since I was 6 years old, being the only Black woman really in the space. So I'm not afraid to be different anymore at this time.
I think, when you say you walk into the space and there's people that are uncomfortable or trying to get used to it, I think that's an experience that a lot of women in male-dominated fields have. Karen, I want to go back to you and kind of find out what that felt like to you at the beginning. I know that when I started in Sports Center, and this is well documented in a book, so I'm not giving, but like the Playboy channel was on. There was literally porn on above my head as I'm, 21 years old, working 6 at night to 3 in the morning. And so as you guys were all talking about mentors, we had a new boss came in who saw it, and I was the only woman in the room, and I'm working, it's now 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And he says, no, this isn't going to happen anymore. So we've all had that kind of mentor that comes in and says, yeah, no, this is not okay. This is not the way it's going to go.
Mhm.
Aaron, when after a while of walking in and being the only one, whether it was the only female or the only person of color, or in your cases, both,
Mhm.
how did your feelings around that change, develop, and perhaps embrace?
Yeah. Well, I would say that my first day at work at the new company, my boss took me around to all the buildings and introduced me to all of the partners. And when we arrived at the building that included our boardroom, he said somewhat matter of factly to me, this is the boardroom and this is as close as you'll ever get to it. And now the good news about that is he was really trying to set the stage for the environment that I was coming into, in the sense that it was a male-dominated environment. But I'm sure it won't surprise any of you that that became motivation for me.
Right.
And he was great at giving me opportunities. And then eventually, when I was working with the gentleman who became our CEO, one of the things that I learned how to do, I was listening to Viola talk about our parents, and sometimes you're lucky, and I was clearly lucky when I was born into our family, because our mother was a real strong, kind of trailblazer. But our father, I remember just as I was starting at KPMG, maybe 2 years in, I was sitting around grousing about something, and he just stopped me dead in my tracks. And he said, Karen, I don't want to hear about your problems. I want to know what you're doing about your problems.
Mhm.
And then he walked me through a series of what ifs, and it changed my whole perspective. And when you combine those two, in terms of the determination and motivation to do well at that company, because I didn't meet a single person at that company, at our company, that was a bad person. I just think there were old habits and culture that you just get used to. And when things were inappropriate, I didn't usually mince words. That is unacceptable in this environment, in this room or this office or whatever it was. In terms of being the only one in the room, that could some days be daunting. There's no question about that. But as I said earlier, I always sought advice and counsel. How can I be better? What would have made that better? And just the like many people or ladies are saying here, that intestinal fortitude to put forward your best foot and effort allows you to leave it all on the table. And if it turns out the way you wanted it to, or in our cases, in a lot of situations, better than people probably thought, well, I did my part and I didn't let it, unwind my dream, so to speak. And so it was challenging, but over time, you establish the credibility by doing the things that you know to do. And we talked about values earlier. Having those values are just really important because they keep you going. The days when things don't go so well, you know who you are as a person.
Mhm.
The days that you do really well, don't spend time reading the headlines, because as soon as you do, then you're not. And just really keeping your head down and your eyes forward and looking for ways to impact other people. But, and, being the only one, I remember when other women started coming along, and then you weren't the only one
Yeah.
in the room. And that's a real, moment of pride. Not that I individually had anything to do with it, but you see other people coming along and you know that you're doing the right things, or at least the company is trying to do the right things.
Yep. Shauna, how are you kind of directing towards women or women of color specifically? Kind of how do you seek out opportunities for this group that we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of it is honestly the way my whole career as I was looking for talent. I think maybe it was part of who my friends were always coming up. I was always someone who really had diverse group of friends. And I saw the value in that. And when I was always like filling my staff, when I was hiring people, I was actually the last place I was at, I was always known as like the person who had the department that had diversity. And, and I really, it was kind of funny because, again, people knew it and people appreciated it. So I think that one is the way that I look to make sure that at SLG Impact, we have advisors and we have consultants and we have coaches. So really, I make sure that it is a diverse group. I've actually even needed to be a bit careful at times and say, well, you know what, actually, I'm not going to add that person because it would, adding just one more white male is not what I need to really make sure that, again, I'm staying true to my values and I'm staying true to what I'm trying to do here. Actually just announced a phenomenal woman yesterday as a new advisor, who's Kelly Coleman, who's an SVP at Nielsen. So she's a Black woman, she's very strong. And I think, again, I make sure that I keep myself in check and keep the people around me very representative of that when I'm looking for clients. Again, I think it's like, who am I talking to? Who am I associating with? And seeking out those opportunities and providing those solutions for people. And so again, I think it's a very purposeful, very intentional effort to go and try to connect with the right people and identify where they may have a challenge that we can, again, as I said, like provide a solution.
And Violet, Blake talked about it a little bit and Karen talked about it a little bit, and I had the same experience. People maybe would think that we don't belong or talk behind our backs. in your position, they're talking right at your face. And so it's nobody's talking behind your back, or maybe the other refs are, but the players are talking to your face. How did you develop whatever your response was going to be? And I mean like emotional, physical response, as well as your verbal response when people are telling you right to your face that you don't belong.
Well, it's kind of twofold because, like I said at the beginning, is that you kind of have to understand the profession of just being a referee. And it's a very negative profession because, we're always the reason why a particular team lost or why we changed the game or whatever we did. And I think the one thing for me, and this is something that I actually held true to when I was going through the whole process of being that young, young woman, that young referee in the NBA, is that you definitely have to understand that I don't think anything that was said, whether it was written or whether it was verbal, that it was personal. You can't take anything personal because I always said to myself, first of all, they don't even know me. All they know is that, I have this shirt on. I'm trying to do something that has never been done, as far as refereeing in the NBA, and people don't like change, as we can see in the world today. Change is just a problem for almost everyone. And in my case, I felt like that was the issue. It was change. It was, what? Why are we allowing a woman to be here? Why? We don't need them. Why don't they just stay over and keep doing, doing what they're doing? Why do they want to come over here and referee with us? And I go, how about this? How about you can keep having your opinion. I've given an opportunity. Thank you, the late David Stern, for having just the knowledge, having, looking beyond the years, not being okay about saying, you know what, if a woman is qualified, if we train her and she is at the top of her class, and we can hire her. And you know what? I'm not sure if that's really what his thought process was, but that's the way it turned out. And I say this to young girls all the time. I go, you know what? How about, in which all of us on this panel has said this, how about let's prepare ourselves? How about let's be strong, let's be confident, let's have the work ethic? Because if you have all those things, all that chatter don't really matter. I think Karen said it's really irrelevant because if you're qualified to do the job, that's what matters. And again, you will win over all the naysayers. And being a part of this
Or not.
is one thing.
Or not.
You said what now?
Or not. I mean, sometimes you can't win them over.
Absolutely, you can't. And but and I'm looking at the ladies on this panel. How about none of us really cared?
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't care. We go, you know what? We're gonna
just gotta go.
We're gonna go, we're gonna train, we're gonna develop, and we're gonna be, I used to tell guys on our staff is that the one positive with the NBA, even whether it was positive or negative, is that in the NBA, people have to know your name. They have to know who you are. And that's one thing that the league did very well. When D and I first came into the league, we had so many interviews and radio, interviews, television interviews, NBA stuff, you name it, they put us out there. So literally when I walked out, everyone knew who I was, which was a positive for me. Not knowing, looking back on it, which was a really, really big positive, because that's the first line of respect of people knowing who you are, So I think for me, I just took every little piece of whatever I could gather or whatever I can find, as well as my own, and like I said, intestinal fortitude, knowing that I was qualified, knowing that I had worked hard, knowing that I had deserved the opportunity. And I took all those things and just went to work. like the next, like, like the next male. And I think that was for me, and just be myself. And I think that's where I proved that, you know what, if you just need the opportunity, and
Yeah,
we can be successful. That's it.
If I can extend off
Sure.
of what you're saying, I think that something that you're talking about, everybody's touched on this a little bit, is if you can find your voice and stand in your strength and pay less attention to what other people are saying you can or can't do, it's like, if somebody else says I can't do it, you know what? Watch me and take pictures, because I'm going to go do and find a way to find success. And I think that, again, it's like, it's not easy. And everybody on this panel has probably had numerous times where we get shaky and you lose self-confidence and stuff, but you have to look yourself in the mirror. You have to stay true to your values. You have to continue to prove yourself to yourself every day. And it's less about proving other people wrong. Again, it's about stand in your strength, prove yourself to yourself. And also, like, it helps you to minimize the chatter that you were just said that earlier. I think, everybody has talked about that. Like, people are going to have their opinions. You know what? That's your problem. It's your problem, and might be my issue in a short term sometimes when I have to handle that business. And like you said, Karen, tell someone that is inappropriate and keep it moving. But that all just is distraction that gives into it. You just got to, again, it's eyes forward, keep it moving.
Absolutely. Great
if
point.
you have questions, throw some questions into the chat. You're welcome to. I've got a little bit more for Blake and for Karen. Blake, you may have to unmute yourself, but there you are. I love that you said, I'm 30 now and I'm not listening to them anymore. And I'm thinking, oh, wait till you get to 50 and you really don't care at all. And so I'm wondering what 40 looks like to you, what 50 looks like to you, like where you picture your impact to be, where you hope it will be in a decade, in 2 decades.
Yeah. Wow, that's such a big question. I want the stands in any arena, every arena, to represent our country as a collective, unique country that it is. I remember walking into the arenas when I was a young girl and literally being able to pick out another Black person across, the way, where you could say, oh, there's another Black person. They love hockey. That's amazing. I just want more color. I want more diversity. I want to cross pollinate with other powerful women in the sport. I just want to share more stories and get people excited about ice hockey, because I think, it has gotten a bad rep. It has. And I would like to be a part of that change into moving it forward. And then also bringing women into this space right now, because I'm getting flooded with amazing emails. How did you get into scouting? Well, I just told you my story. It was just a happenstance, right? So I really want to make that opportunity for other women and girls coming up.
Well, and it leads me to exactly what I wanted to talk to Karen about, which is the ownership in Kansas City, and how important that is for women in general, for us to be able to see you, and then of course for women of color as well. Kind of, why was that something that appealed to you, the ownership of Kansas City?
There were a number of factors. I had a chance to talk to Jackie Joyner Kersey one day, and she obviously played in many sports at the highest level. And I asked her, so what's next for women in sports? And she said, I think it's really important for women to have different leadership roles, like Blake, like Violet, like Shauna. These are roles that were typically held by men. And then she said, I really think the next step is ownership. And that was 2 years ago. And Kansas City just went through a transition because we always had a single family that owned the Royals. And when Mr. Glass was ready to sell the organization, the primary partner in the group, he wanted it to be a group and a reflection of the community. And because of I retired, and again, I mentioned that my grandfather taught me about baseball. I thought, what a way for me to hopefully emulate behavior, have children emulate behavior, that we can do this. This is about, in a lot of ways, the young ladies that are watching us, because I'm in my 60s. So I'm hoping to have people look back, have me look back and see that I've impacted other young girls. And of course, it's something that I think represents a good investment, not only in our team, but in our community, and the efforts to have a group that looks like the community, or the community that we want to have. And because of the Royals Charities, which is the other piece of this, I'm on the board of the Royals Charities, it gives me even more opportunity to impact what's going on in our community through that organization as well. But really, it's something that we don't get enough opportunities to do. More and more, we're seeing it. Renee Montgomery down at Atlanta. So it was really a great opportunity for me to kind of walk the talk, if you will, about how to lead and have people emulate your behavior and inspire young girls to know they can do whatever they put their minds to. And secondly, it's about, removing barriers. The guy that I told you about on my first day, he was instrumental in me becoming a partner at that firm, because he helped me remove barriers. And I want to be that person in this phase of my life, helping people remove the barriers that keep them down, and just hopefully inspire them that they can do whatever they want to do.
Wonderful. We have just a few minutes left, and Latonya has a question that she put in the chat. You guys can write questions in the chat, and it's for Blake. And it says from Latonya, how did you keep from losing your identity and passion, all things considered?
Oh, wow. Latonya, that's my mother's name. So I love that. Um, I had a strong mother. My mother was kind of like my bodyguard when I would walk inside of a rink, and I would get stares from white parents and boys that wanted to tease me or bully me or whatever. So I held on to my mother like, she was my security blanket, and she would bring me back home and she would say, "Great job, kiddo. Like, let's suit it up and go to the next tournament." So I have a strong mother who instilled in me values. She sacrificed so much for me. So every time I do anything, every time I wake up, I just want to hustle, not just for me, but for her. So that's kind of what gives me the energy. And seeing these beautiful Black girls coming up to me saying, "You might have been the reason that I started playing hockey," or, "I want to go to Boston College because you went to Boston College," or something just so minute. If I get a picture of two girls that are learning how to play, I mean, that is just like, that's just the fuel that that's all I need.
Beautiful. And just a little bit more time, Erica has a question for Karen. And Erica Ayala says to Karen, like you, I grew up loving baseball, but the narrative around the sport is that it's too long or boring. What innovations would you like to see in the sport, and what role will women play in that future?
Yeah, I mentioned at the outset about the women who played in the Negro Leagues and how well they did. I mean, maybe Peanut Johnson, she struck out Babe Ruth and so forth. And so I think there will come a time when it may not be in Major League Baseball formally, in the next 5 to 10 years. But, the Major League Baseball now has accepted the Negro League as part of Major League Baseball. And that's a significant event in terms of women and African Americans and so forth being involved in Major League Baseball. But the other thing that you asked, I mean, honoring Mamie Peanut Johnson and the other ladies is also part of the ownership piece of it. But in terms of what baseball can do, I know Major League Baseball is considering a lot of options to make it more interesting. Having been raised or growing up with my grandpa who loved pitching, I don't find it boring at all. I love a pitcher's duel. But they are looking at things to expand the playoffs so that there are more teams involved and people get more involved in their communities. There's some other rule changes around having someone on second base starting in the extra inning. So they're doing things to raise the level of excitement. I'm not sure that in the near term, you're going to be able to reduce the time it takes to play 9 innings, but they are clearly trying to make it better for other teams to participate in the playoffs and the exciting part of baseball and winning games and extra innings and so forth. I will take back with me a question around how do we get more women involved, not so much in some of the areas we're talking about, but as players. How does that happen? And I will take that away from this discussion, bring it up.
Well, Karen, I can really tell you that I was one of those little girls who, I'll never forget, I played Little League. I was the only girl with my little bowerettes, and my hat wouldn't even fit really on my head because I loved having my red. I was on the Indians, and my little red barrettes my hat couldn't go over my ponytails. But I was that little girl playing Little League, only girl on the team. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for allowing me to do it. So,
Well, that's awesome.
Well, I mean, I think next is to keep an eye on the Sparks social media, the call to action going forward. I thank Rusha Brown and the LA Sparks for putting this panel together. Blake, Shauna, Karen, Violet, thank you so much. And for everybody who has participated and listened, I think the message that we've all had is go a little bit deaf to your critics. And remember, if you're thinking about you and you're thinking about you, that's 2 of you worrying about you. So I always say, go ahead, spend all your time if you want. But look for following the Sparks on social media, the call to action there, get involved. This is our month, but we're going to take the whole year, the whole decade and beyond. So I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to Rusha for setting it up.